There we go. Love that. If you guys have any follow-ups to anything that we mentioned here, yeah, please use the chat box. Also, love to hear from you guys if you actually want to speak. I would encourage it.
Encouraged and allowed.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think as usual, I like to start with a warm-up question. Yeah, just to kind of get the brain going here. Here's one on hydration packs. I like carrying my hydration pack on all of my runs, even if it's just a 30-minute run or a 4-mile easy run. Sometimes I won't even have more than 8 ounces of water. I almost always want to carry a snack as well with me just as a backup if I decide to want to continue running or walking for a little farther after my run is over. Is this excessive or silly? Any recommendations for not relying on this?
I love this question because I feel this like so hard. I am the same, and I'll wear a hydration pack like running around town just to like carry my phone and keys because I really don't love holding anything, and I'm also not a huge fan of putting stuff in pockets. My perspective on this is like, if it doesn't slow you down or inhibit your training, like who cares? Like, yeah, wear a hydration pack. Like, I wish I could wear one just like at work or like whenever we, you know, like our drive, like any moment. I feel like having like my hydration and snacks mounted on top, like in the front of me, is just the better way to live life. But, you know, you also don't want to like use that as an excuse to make poor training decisions in terms of like, oh, well, you know, I've got 8 ounces of water, I guess I'll just add on a couple miles. Like, that's not a really great reason to change your training. You know, eating a snack right after you run, great. Like, all that's great. I don't think it's excessive or silly at all. If you feel self-conscious about it, you can always get like shorts that have pockets. I know for women, I really like the Smash'ems. They're ultra running shorts that have like epic pockets around the waistband, or the Oiselle tool belt shorts have excellent pocketness as well. I think, yeah, you know, like it's always better. I mean, to a certain extent, it's always better to be a little bit over prepared until being over prepared slows you down in terms of like, you know, if you go on every run with like a liter of water, that's a lot, depending on the athlete. Like, you don't want it to slow you down or cause you to make decisions you wouldn't otherwise be making. Yeah, what do you think? You never, like, you don't wear a vest until like we're doing like a 4-hour odyssey. And even then you'll find ways around it.
I strongly dislike wearing a vest. I don't like having any more stuff than I need to. But I think with that said, like in the summer, I never, and I've said this to other athletes, I never leave the house without a gel and without at least 12 ounces of water, even if it's just for, you know, my Friday 50-minute run with hills. Like, it's just not, you just never know what happens out there. You've had a week of training. You could get thirsty. Maybe, you know, you're feeling a little bonky, you're tired. It's always a good idea to kind of have a little something extra. Now, like, I think like with what Zoe said, like, that's not just because you have that stuff doesn't mean that you should go over your prescribed training by any, you know, extreme amount or something like that. You know, usually like a mile or something is fine if you're not out there chasing mileage, and we can probably get into that with a different question. But yeah, no, don't feel bad about carrying your hydration pack. I think that's, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people are just super comfortable with it. I like using a waist belt or a handheld, and I go out on all my runs with that.
You know, like even like when Kylie and I do long runs in the winter, she brings a pack so that she has like water and dog bags for the pooches. So, you know, there's lots of reasons.
Yeah. And I would rather you guys be more cautious, especially with how hot it's been. I've recently, you know, especially athletes who are on maybe more of the marathon and road running side of things, they tend to not bring fluids with them or fuel. I don't know what it is, and maybe Drew can speak to this a little bit as kind of our resident road running coach. But
Please translate the ways of
you
the
know,
road
I
runner.
feel like road runners don't want to carry anything. And so I have a lot of athletes this summer not paying attention to the weather and then really bonking, especially on their long runs and during their workouts, as a result of just really poor planning and not taking enough ownership over their fueling and nutrition.
It's like so easy to bring a gel at all times.
Really?
You
Yeah,
know?
I think so
like,
too.
Stash it in a sports bra, put it in your short. Like almost every pair of shorts has somewhere to put it.
Yeah. So again, you know, it's better to be cautious. If you know you like your hydration pack, yeah, I see no reason not to take it with you. Yeah, Drew, I don't know if you want to comment on this at all.
Yeah,
as a more minimal runner.
I do. So 2 parts just to address the I guess perceived view of road runners versus trail runners. I think that when people go out on the trail, part of like trail running, like I guess etiquette really is that you are more self-sufficient, that you have to prepare for the worst, and you tend to be outside a little longer. And so it's known, like if you're going to get into trail running, which may ultimately lead into ultra marathoning, that you need to carry stuff with you. You're not out in the woods running by like a 7-Eleven or anything like that. You have to be more self-sufficient. And so with a lot of road runners that have, I guess, achieved what they want to on the roads, where they haven't really needed to carry more than maybe 8 ounces of water, maybe 1 gel at a time. And then when they get up into some of those longer distances, maybe start playing around with trails, it's kind of a new adventure for them. And so you're almost, even if you're like a half marathon or a marathoner and you're super experienced, but then you're like, you know what, I'm going to get into the 50K or a 50 miler. You're almost starting over when it comes to, I guess, preparing nutrition and hydration related subjects. With the initial question about like, I guess, running with a pack and is that bad, or how would I stop doing that? I wouldn't. If you are like mentally and like just attached to your pack, where maybe you just feel more comfortable and you feel like this is like, it's just what you do, you're used to it, I wouldn't stop really, unless, like Zoe said, it's causing detriment to your training. There'd be no reason to stop. Just keep wearing your vest, keep taking stuff with you, even if it was like, I think the question was like 8 ounces of water or something like that, but just keep going. Don't stop. If it's working for you, keep doing it.
Yeah, I guess one other thing that I would mention is also, if you're planning on running a longer event or training for, you know, longer adventures, you definitely need to train with kind of all of the stuff that you're going to be utilizing out there. So that means part of that is getting used to wearing the pack. You know, so if you never use a pack and then on race day you decide to use your pack,
you're going to chafe in some new and exciting ways.
Yeah, some stuff is going to come up that you know could have prepared for before. So this is definitely something that I work on. Like, I'm forcing myself to wear a pack because I'm going to have to wear a pack in a couple of weeks for my big race. That's just how it is. You get used to it.
That's a great point, TJ, in that I like to tell my athletes, whatever you do on your long run day needs to mimic as close as possible your race day. And that can be, I know, baby, I know. And that can be apparel, that can obviously will be nutrition, hydration, routine. It will be the pack that you wear. Like literally everything you do on your long run days, in my mind, should mimic your ultimate race day procedure.
Yeah. Kylee, as the pack wearer, do you kind of agree with this? Should we dive deeper?
I mean, I don't usually wear packs on like shorter runs, but that's personal preference. I like having one of those belt things that you can throw a gel and some hydration in. I just find that's a little bit more comfortable, but I do think you made a good point, TJ, about athletes being prepared in hotter weather conditions. Maybe not my run coach athletes, but a lot of my nutrition athletes live in hotter areas that they need to make sure that they're even taking water on like shorter, less than 60-minute runs because it's super hot. Electrolyte wise, I mean, sometimes it's good to bring electrolytes as well on a shorter run. I'm not saying every person needs to do that, but consideration of the person, their sweat rate, all that kind of stuff, and being prepared for even the shorter runs with your fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Thanks. Yeah, let's move on to another question here. I think this is kind of a similar question. Yeah, awesome. I feel pretty well dialed as far as my gear, fueling, water purification, and other things go for adventure runs. But it's dawned on me that I haven't been carrying much in the way of first aid, at least not in comparison to what I bring hiking or backpacking. I'm trying to determine which essentials to carry without being excessive and weighed down. I was hoping to hear what you all pack for a long run that might be more remote or more committed or technical.
I love this question because I'm wrong about it for sure. I never take a first aid kit, but I probably should. I mean, they make some pretty light ones. I would say, I mean, it's just so dependent. Like I think if you have the ability, investing in like a Garmin InReach can be really, really great. I think being able to communicate with, like having basically like your satellite office, like whether that's your significant other or a trusted friend, and letting them know, like if you're running late or if, Virginia has a medical kit. I think, the smaller, the better, particularly because like I often find with trail running, there's not a lot of area between like the first aid, and I'm Woofer certified, but the first aid I'd reasonably be able to give someone on the trail, but that also like reasonably fits in a running pack. Like there's not a ton of overlap. Like if, I fall and scrape a knee and I'm bleeding, like I'm fine not putting a Band-Aid on that right away. Maybe I'll flush it out with water if available. But if like shit really goes wrong, I'm not going to be able to like do stitches on myself or like splint. Like I don't take a splint out in the field. So I really think for me, the biggest things to take out there are potentially a communication device and an emergency blanket, because those are small, they are reasonable, and they can really, really help in a pinch. And I've actually been in a scenario where I didn't have an emergency blanket and really wished I had one. But I think if you were doing something like 4-pass loop, like a really long, maybe 7+ hour type of thing, maybe take a medical kit. But I would also say even better than just taking stuff with you, do some continuing ed classes, potentially through Knowles, or a lot of times outdoor stores in your area will do wilderness first aid, kind of in beginner courses. Because if you have the world's best first aid kit with you out in the field and your friend falls and gets hurt and you have no freaking clue what you're doing, great, awesome. You have an $80 first aid kit and no idea what you're doing. That's my 10 cents. And I'm open to being wrong on that. But I tend to not take a first aid kit out with me just because my priority typically is speed. And I'm rarely in a place where I feel like what comes in a first aid kit is going to be I feel like if something happens, it's usually going to be something I'm going to break or sprain something, and short of splinting myself, what are you going to do? It's way better to have a communication device and tell someone I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Because
Awesome.
then the priority becomes how do you remove yourself from the field? And there's, in most ultralight medical kits, there's no way of removing yourself from the field. Potentially if you got hurt, the only way I could see a first aid kit really being all that helpful is if you are really intent on cleaning out a wound, that's probably a pretty good idea. Or if you cut yourself in a way that you're afraid you might bleed out. But other than that, I'm not totally assessing likely scenarios. The type of injuries you tend to see on trail runs are not the kind of thing that you can ameliorate with a kit from REI.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes intuitive sense as well. If you were to say lacerate something in your femur and get your artery, what is that going to do? it's not going to do anything.
I mean,
right?
if you fall
like
off,
you need things to make a tourniquet, and without that, you'd be in trouble. So I think, the communication device on longer, more adventure runs is probably a good idea. The InReach has gotten so small, and they do month-to-month plans.
So you can like activate.
Yeah.
deactivate.
So you can like buy one and then use it for, the time, like the months where you're going to be out adventuring more, and then turn it off. I think it's definitely important to have a small bivy blanket, and a water filter.
Yeah.
A buff can be really helpful. And also, I always bring for longer stuff, Gore-Tex fully
I would take
jacket.
I would take a taped seam jacket. Sorry, I was thinking more in terms of first aid, but necessary gear, I would definitely say if you're going to be up in the Alpine exposed for any amount of time, taped seamed jacket. And that's different than like if you go to REI or a running store, just like whatever Nike windbreaker is on clearance is probably not going to cut it. You're going to want to turn it inside out and inspect the seams to make sure that they're taped, which means there's a waterproofing element over where it's sewn together. You're also going to want to really look at the zipper and make sure it's a sturdier zipper than comes on like, like a $80 jacket. I think that that's really, really key is like, you want something more than just like whatever you would wear if you were jogging around town. You want something that's going to actually probably keep you dry in the Alpine.
Yeah. I mean, that's really critical. Right. And I would say, maybe if you want to err on the side of caution, there are some really light first aid kits that could be helpful if you were to like fall, cut yourself, and have something that you'd have trouble, managing the bleeding. A few Band-Aids, gauze, medical tape. I don't know a lot of people who carry that, but yeah, we carry that for backcountry skiing. So I'm not so sure why that would be any different for running.
Sometimes I always think about like, if shit goes really wrong, how are they going to write about my accident in the American Alpine Journal? And like, I don't want to be that idiot that's like, oh, she had a pack that only had one goo and a flask, no emergency blanket.
Yeah. Kylie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm with Zoe. I probably should take more things, but I don't. But I'm actually looking at getting for the dogs. There's a this dog first aid thing that you can carry your dog out of the backcountry if it gets hurt, like a backpack type thing where you put it underneath their midsection, I guess, and carry them. So I'm actually looking, the company is actually based in Carbondale, and I'm looking at getting one of those and taking it on runs too, because if you have a dog that's like medium to large size and they get hurt, it can be really difficult to bring them out if they can't really walk very well. So that's random. It's not like obviously for
no, I think that's
human,
actually a really great point.
Got to keep Lotzi under control.
I know, right?
I feel like Lotzi, I want to get Lotzi a backpack so that he could carry me out.
Actually,
yeah, we need to like get a little ski jor thing and like have
Yes.
us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should do what helps you feel safe, but also like, I would say that educating yourself is worth a lot more than a first aid kit.
And the two combined
are pretty powerful, but like, again, you don't want to be going out with like a 20-pound freaking pack for your, for all your runs. Like at a certain point, being like there's a, inflection point where taking too much stuff actually becomes more dangerous. Like you're not going to know how to use it. It could slow you down. I mean, I think that is like just when stuff becomes excessive, but like you don't need to take like a jet boil and like a whole like, meatball sub out with you every time you go on a mountain run.
Yeah. Although the sub would be nice.
Yeah. I've got my emergency meatball sub. Don't worry. I'm bleeding out.
Yeah. And I also, the amount of stuff you take can always be adjusted depending on, how many people you expect to encounter out there. So like if you're doing something like the 4-pass loop, you could bring a little bit less because that's a really, really crowded loop. So there's a lot of people who could provide help. if that became, you know, something that you needed. Okay, let's move on to another question here. We'll just go right down the list today. When training for a trail ultra that doesn't have a lot of vert, is it better to do most runs on the road, especially if those runs focus on strides or hill repeats? This is assuming that the long run will be done on trail with a somewhat similar terrain as the upcoming race. This is a really good question, very specific. Yeah, Kylie or Zoe, do you guys want to take a stab at it, or do you want me to jump right in?
Oh, you know, I think sometimes trail runners tend to overestimate it's complicated. Everything's dependent. However, if you want to increase your running economy, which is the primary objective of 99.99% of our training, you want to run on terrain that facilitates that. So super technical terrain that causes you to break stride or slow down is not going to facilitate helping your body become more efficient at running. Like if you're constantly having to power hike or step over rocks and roots in a way that like genuinely interrupts your stride, that's not going to be a super effective way of getting better at running. That's not to say that you should never do that, because, you know, if the first time you're encountering any kind of obstacles on the trail is on race day, that's not great. And trail running specifically is very neuromuscular. So developing that kind of responsive lateral movement to like navigate technical sections responsively and effectively, like you want to practice that. But I would say the majority of your training should be on terrain that facilitates good running economy, whether that's like faster, flatter trail or like, yeah, road running. I mean, I do like 80% of my runs on the road, you know, just because of like the time constraints of work. Like, even though I, you know, race mountain races, I do the majority of my training on like pretty unexciting terrain, because my priority is getting better at running, not just like, you know, becoming a boss power hiker. And when you actually dive into the studies, athletes who have more developed running economy and better efficiency on flat terrain, that translates to grades of like up of like 15%. It starts to really break down depending on the athlete around 15, 16% when stuff gets really, really steep. So your time and energy is best spent becoming a better runner and then applying being a better runner on the trails on weekends. And yeah, I don't know if that answers that question very well.
I think it started to get there. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so much good information there, Zoe. Kylie, Drew, kind of what are your thoughts on running on the roads and applying that to the trails?
For me personally, I feel like doing, and Zoe kind of mentioned this, doing some runs on trails is probably a good idea, because especially if you have ankle issues like myself, trying to get used to that proprioception and like make sure that you're able to handle the trail without getting injured is a good idea. So mixing in some trail is good. But yeah, if you're always doing like these technical trail runs and you're doing a flatter trail race, then that's probably not a good idea. So on point with Zoe's points, I just like to make sure that some of my athletes are not completely doing even just like a long run on the trail. I try to get them to do at least one or two during the week as well.
Yeah. What about you, Drew?
I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I personally, with me, I'm kind of prone to ankle sprains. And so when I'm training for a longer trail run, honestly, like I might do probably one long run on a trail every other week. I mean, I am like, I don't need a whole lot of experience on the trail. Like I know how to do it. Like I understand like proprioception and different intrinsic muscle fibers and working all that. But I personally have a higher risk of injury when running trails. And so if I'm going to hurt myself, it's going to be on race day. It's not going to be a day leading up to it. I want to make sure that I'm healthy and fit and ready to go on race day and pretty much go from there. So pretty much on board with the others, more or less.
Yeah, I think
Go
Drew
ahead.
actually is an interesting athlete to examine this question through. Like when he, competes in Arkansas, I think he competes against a lot of people who, in my opinion, probably run too much trail. And because they're always out there running like at fairly slow paces, like on race day, if you think you're going to show up and run fast when you exclusively practice running slow, that's not going to happen. Drew like definitely emphasizes speed and running economy in his training. And so, when you pit someone that maybe doesn't do, I don't want to say Drew doesn't do enough trail because like he is undefeated at trail races. So also, like he does less trail versus people that I think, in my opinion, maybe do too much trail. Like Drew's the one walking home with a giant check. So I think that, if you had to err on one side in training, it would be on the running economy side. But that being said, there are, you want to make sure that your muscles are ready for the eccentric demands of downhill running. There's caveats to everything, but prioritizing economy and efficiency will get you a lot further than over dependence on specific terrain.
Yeah, great answers, guys. Totally. I think honestly, you guys did a great job with this. If you're thinking about this very specifically, like imagine a fast, flat ultra on the trails. You think kind of like javelina or something like that. And like running on the road is probably going to be really effective for developing the economy, the efficiency, getting into the workouts that are going to help you to really be successful at a race like that. In general, across the board, we've talked about this on multiple calls, so feel free to go back in the archives or read anything we've written on the blog. Strides in hills, especially for athletes who are only a year or two along in this program, always do that on smooth terrain. Don't do that on rocky terrain. It can be on a trail, but if the trail's rocky, you're not going to get as much out of that workout as you possibly could. The smoother that terrain, where you can stop thinking about where each foot strike is going and how you're going to navigate all of the different kind of variables that trail is throwing at you. When you take those things out of the picture, you really start to actually work on your stride, your efficiency, getting as much power out of each kind of push off as you can. If you're only 1 or 2 years into this program, your economy isn't going to be as well developed. So it's really important to realize that the more variables you put in front of you when doing these workouts, the less you're going to get out of the workouts. And then you want to translate those fundamentals to your trail runs on the weekends. A great layout for a week of training is, Tuesday, easy run on the roads or really smooth trails. Your workout day on Wednesday on the roads or really smooth trails. Thursday, easy run on trails. Saturday, easy run on trails. Sunday, depending on how you feel, easy run on smooth trails or roads, or it can be a little bit more adventure-y if you're feeling good. And just consistently exposing yourself to terrain that facilitates, your best possible stride and biomechanical kind of like motion, that's going to help develop the neural pathways necessary for becoming a better runner. If you're always running on trail, you're going to be really well adapted to the trails, right? You're going to be feeling really good in that kind of terrain, but your fundamentals, they might not be as well developed as well. And that's a problem, because you really want to get the most out of every push off, every stride when you're on the trails. And in order to do that, you have to run on the roads. You have to be efficient. You have to build the foundation, and then you bring in the other layers on top of that. And so, you see athletes who are 3 or 4 years into really working on this stuff, flying on the trails and doing a lot more runs on the trails and a lot more adventures, because they have the foundation and they've done the work. And it takes a while to get there. So you have to be really patient with yourself, set yourself up for success. One of the biggest things that I really like about what we do at Microcosm is a lot of athletes. We're having you guys run through the winter. Very, very important to be consistent in the winter. It's an extremely good opportunity to get on the roads and work on efficiency then you get into the adventure season in spring and summer, and you are a completely different athlete because you've worked on those, developing those neural pathways all winter long. Without that, you're missing a really important piece of the training. So if you are training for that like faster, flatter ultra, like it's totally fine to do a lot of those runs on the road or really smooth trails. I would just recommend making sure you get 1 or 2 runs in, longer runs in like on the trails on the weekend or on a Thursday, whatever that looks like based on your kind of work and life schedule. And yeah, just go from there. Just know that like if you develop the speed, it's going to translate into faster running on the trails and more endurance, being able to hold your pace for longer and just feeling generally better out there.
Yeah.
Cool.
To answer Denzel's question, he asks, on long runs with tempos prescribed, should we try and put the tempo effort into the more runnable trail terrain or maybe pick more rolling trail that day? I would say, so for tempos, definitely you want to pick a section where like you're not going to be power hiking because it's very hard to sustain a true tempo effort while power hiking. So you want to find something that's runnable and where, again, you're not going to be forced to break stride. Because like, let's say you have to pause in a way that like to step over roots or rocks or like navigate technical terrain, that's going to knock you out of the aerobic intensity that we're trying to get at through tempo running. Like, I wouldn't obsess about like, oh no, you have to step over a rock and like for a second, you stopped or whatever. Like it's not ideal. Don't lose sleep over it. Try to pick terrain that's going to facilitate hitting a very consistent effort. So like maybe, don't do your tempo on like a 20-minute steep downhill or a 20-minute super steep uphill. I think there are some times when doing a mild, like a consistent climb, a consistent but runnable climb can be very advantageous for tempo runs because you can nail the intensity while reducing the impact. Rolling terrain can be really, really great for tempos because you practice intensity with different biomechanical dynamics. And I think that can be really advantageous. But the key is to just find terrain where you're going to be able to consistently lock into that effort.
Yeah, I would definitely avoid too much power hiking during those tempos, but variable terrain is totally fine. I think, especially if you're a more developed athlete who has a little bit more history. So you're not as, your speed isn't capped as much by like how technical the trail is and stuff like that. And we do have plenty of those runners on this team. So yeah, in general though, keep it to easier terrain so you can really focus on kind of the effort that you're doing. And if that's a little bit of up and then a little bit of down or a gradual uphill, that's all fine. I think just stay away from the extremes on either end, like super steep downhill running tempos or super steep uphill power hiking.
We don't
tempos.
we're never going to prescribe a downhill tempo.
No.
But like, again, really focus on that effort. So like if you start going downhill, that doesn't mean, I'm going the same pace, so I don't need to go as hard. You're still going a tempo effort. If you're going uphill, that doesn't mean you think, I'm going uphill, I need to try harder. And then you rocket out of your tempo effort. Keep that effort sustainable no matter what the terrain looks like. Like even if, if you looked at the elevation profile, if it was undulating, your effort tabletop.
Should be, in essence. Takes a long time to be able to develop that skill. I can't even do it every time, but yeah, that's kind of what you're going for. Yeah. Cool. A couple more questions here. We're doing this is like a rapid fire Friday session.
We're actually doing it.
For the first time in history. Okay. I know this is a great question for you, Zoe and Drew. You're kind of more of our shoe experts. The question goes like this. I know that general shoe lifespan is 300 to 500 miles, but is this different for the beefier Hokas, given how much foam they're made with? What's the best way to tell if your shoe is near the end of its life?
Oh, this is got Drew all over it.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. So with a lot of Hoka models, you aren't necessarily, and it's not just Hoka, there are other models from other brands that are starting to break into that maximalism category. But generally speaking, there isn't necessarily more foam or EVA. The idea is that they have higher oxygen content. What you see when a shoe starts to break down is that the oxygen escapes that EVA, that foam midsole, and then has a hard time, I guess, decompressing, if you will. And that's when we replace shoes. So I wouldn't think that because a shoe is bigger that it's going to last longer. I think that that's a pretty common fallacy. Your Hokas, for the most part, are still going to last around that 300 to 500 marker. However, there are certain, I guess, blends of foam. For example, like a Hoka Speed Goat, for example, that'll be like an EVA rubber blend they'll call RMAT, but different blends of EVA and something else that will create a longer lasting shoe. And I know Zoe gets to test a lot of shoes too. She might have some that kind of break the mold, but generally speaking, don't think that a maximalist shoe lasts any longer than a traditional shoe.
Yeah, I'll actually say Hokas tend to be, for me, and this is, I think other factors that influence how long your shoes last, like, don't wear them keep your running shoes are running shoes. Like, they are not,
Hiking shoes,
they're not hiking
walking
shoes. They're not
yeah.
walking shoes. And the more specific you keep that, like if you have a pair of shoes that you run in, get a different pair of shoes to wear to the gym, and you'll actually end up saving money on your running shoes by being able to take that pressure off of them. Hokas tend to last, for me, even really just about 300 miles, particularly road Hokas, like the Clifton, because they are made out of that really light kind of foamy EVA, and the oxygen, I find, does leak out of them fairly quickly. Again, how hard you pound the shoe will to an extent influence how long it lasts. But I think whenever you start to see those wrinkles in the foam, and when you see that it's kind of perma compressed, that's a really good sign that it might be time for new shoes. If you're feeling calf, foot sensitivity, knee, things are popping up and your shoes are around 300-ish miles, that's a really good indication that it might be time for a switch. It's a lot cheaper to buy a new pair of shoes than a new knee. So, invest in the things that will prevent injury down the road. Shoes I find Nike also tends to err closer on the 300-mile side of things. New Balance, you can squeak 400 and it's totally different for trail shoes. With trail shoes, I don't even have a mileage prescription, because for me, I tend to wear out the uppers way before I wear out the midsole. And a big way that you can prevent wearing out the uppers on trail shoes is washing them in water and then putting them to dry in the sun. Because one of the primary reasons you get that breakdown of uppers is because of friction caused by dirt. So keeping your trail shoes clean and hand washing them and then setting them out to dry in the sun can help them last a little bit longer as well. But I think, for me, for trail shoes, I'm just gonna they're gonna break before I really get to that 400-mile point. But
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would really you can use Strava, or there's other apps, but track the mileage on your shoes. Don't put it off. If your coach is the one telling you that you need a new pair of shoes, you've let it go. Again, PT is way more expensive than $120 pair of Hokas.
Totally. Drew, did you want the last word?
Yeah, I know we're tailoring this to trail shoes, and Zoe's right. They can be a little harder to determine when it's time to replace, but with road shoes, it's actually a lot easier. A really easy sign for me is looking at the bottom of your shoe. And if your carbon rubber on the bottom is flush or even with the EVA midsole, you're way too late. You should have replaced them a little bit before that. Kind of like tires on your car. If your car tires are ever bald, you missed your mark by a lot. So sometimes looking at the bottoms and just inspecting maybe once every other month or so, and just to see what you're working with can be helpful.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, guys. That was really informative. My only comment is, if you have an unusual niggle that pops up that you've never felt before, strong indication that you should probably switch out your shoes. One of the leading causes of injuries and overuse stuff is running in shoes that are past their prime. All right, let's move on. This is a little bit maybe more of an in-depth question here, so it might kind of take up our last 10, 15 minutes, but really want to get into it. I think it's a great question for everybody here. My partner doesn't run ultras, and sometimes I'm afraid that ultra training may get in the way of some aspects of my life with him. Have you or Zoe experienced this in past relationships? If so, do you have any advice? Maybe Drew, I don't know if you're able to speak to this, but you and your partner, you guys have very different relationships with running. And so I feel like you might be like,
yeah, of course.
I don't know.
Well, let me
have a
just
great
jump right in, because this is not uncommon. And this doesn't matter if you're running road, trail, triathlon, whatever, and it may not even be running. It can be literally like acting or whatever you want. Any activity that you do that's going to take a lot of time from your relationship, it's important for your partner to be on board with that. I know that we've discussed this in another call, but communication is key. Like we can't understate that enough. Making sure that you're communicating with your partner, having a plan, letting each other know what you need and what you want, and coming up with a plan together so that when you do go out for like your 5-hour run or your 7-hour run on the weekend, that your partner isn't at home being like, you know, man, this really sucks. Like, and they're developing a hatred for the sport that you love because it's taking you away from them, if that makes sense. And so TJ mentioned with my wife and I run and my wife doesn't. But she's my number one supporter because she knows how important it is to me. And so when it comes to running, it means that she's at home with 2 wild ass kids. And so that's hard. And so we have to discuss our plan. We have to make sure that she's good, that I'm good. And just, I don't know, it all boils down to communication and making sure that both people in the party are on board.
I think something that I see in y'all's relationship that I think acts as a really good roadmap is that, like, even though Alicia is not an ultra runner or you know, like a competitive marathoner, she is like all in on the stuff that she does, right? So like in the same way that she is going to be Drew's biggest fan, like when he's competing for running, like Alicia is highly involved as with her sorority alumni organization, and Drew is all there supporting her in the things that she does, right? Like he really shows up for her, like in the things that she cares about. And I think that that's a really important framework that, you know, can help other people feel very validated in their passions. Like anytime you can go out of your way to support your partner in the thing that matters to them, they'll be able to understand and apply that same thing, like when you're really going for it in the things that matter to you. You know, I think that's like, even though TJ and I's thing is like fairly similar, you know, even if he was like only did the skiing thing, or if I only did the writing thing, I think we would really try to show up for each other regardless. I think, you know, one of the complexities that running brings in is that fitness and body image things tend to be a common insecurity for human beings. And that can a lot of times show up in relationships when, you know, one partner is, you know, like maybe struggling with their health or body image or insecurity around their level of fitness. And that can just be something worth having a really open, loving, and honest conversation about. You know, I think this is something that I see show up particularly for a lot of women who are really going for it in competitive running and trail running. And a lot of times partners, like it's definitely coming from a place of love, can sometimes be overprotective in ways that aren't helpful or that don't fully recognize the autonomy and empowerment of the other partner in question. I think, again, just having an honest and loving discussion about, you know, whatever reasonable precautions you're taking, and expressing how important it is for you to engage with your activity in these spaces. You know, I've definitely had partners in the past who were uncomfortable with what I was doing. And I think, you know, it took me explaining to the extent that I felt comfortable what I was doing, and then also explaining that it didn't feel good or authentic for me to have to over explain myself, because men aren't forced to over explain themselves, and I won't do it either. And I think that, it just comes down to making sure that your partner isn't unintentionally bringing insecurity about themselves into this question. And if you let them feel heard and seen and validated in that relationship, they owe you the same thing on your side. I think, again, there's sometimes an added level of complexity when it comes to women really putting themselves out there competitively, and or when this bumps up against issues of childcare, because what I see anecdotally and what we see disproportionately in the data is that women bear the brunt of childcare. And, that time and time again for not just my athletes, but when you look at like American time use surveys, women tend to have to do more childcare than men. And like, I get like microcosm dads are amazing. We love you guys. But that's definitely a consideration. And I think that, I wish I had a better answer than practice advocating for yourself, but, I don't know, vote for politicians who are going to make childcare more affordable and accessible, and advocate for yourself.
Great. Yeah, you guys totally cover this question. I don't really have much to add, quite honestly. I just think that everything, again, kind of baselines on the idea of being good communicators, making a plan, like Drew said, obviously super, super important, and being an advocate for yourself. If spending time on the trails is something that is important to you, you have to have the courage to speak up about that in your relationship, and no one's going to do that for you. You have to do that for yourself. Even if you feel you're in an unbalanced relationship, where there's a strain on that passion for you, lean into your coaches, your friends, people who support you in that, and have them help you to kind of pump you up to have those tough conversations. And that's definitely something that I've seen a lot with my athletes, is that it's not that easy in a difficult kind of relationship situation, to have a hard conversation about that, especially for athletes who are training for longer ultras. And it's important to, set those goals with an honest conversation with your partner, your husband, your spouse, whoever it is. If you are having trouble with those conversations, it could be important to maybe reevaluate some of those goals and the strain that goal puts on the relationship. Personally, I would want to see you prioritize the goals and the things that make you happy. But we all know that, we live in a far from perfect world. And so that these kind of things, they do come up and they're quite difficult to deal with. Right. So just own it, really own the tough conversations. I mean, that's my biggest piece of advice. If you internalize all of that, whether you're on the side of my partner is spending too much time doing X, Y, or Z, and that's putting a strain on, the time we spend together and those experiences and the importance of that with our relationship. Or if you're the person who wants to get out and do a 5-hour run to train for your 100 and is having a difficult time expressing that to your partner. I mean, these things go both ways. It's not a black and white situation. If you internalize that and you do not speak up about it, you're only going to continue to find yourself in that challenging place. So I would really recommend, having the courage to have the conversation, expressing, why you feel it's important for you to do that. And generally a good supportive partner will understand that, and you'll be able to make kind of a plan, like Drew mentioned, to make it all happen. Have several athletes who are dads who are doing a lot of childcare, and they, I guess, are good examples for maybe,
but also really yay moms.
Yeah. I'm just, very proud of those dads for sacrificing a lot of training time. Honestly, a lot of training time to support their partners, and it does go both ways. So I do want to make a shout out to those guys.
We have above average men on the team.
We do.
And women. Everyone's pretty above average. It's like a very skewed team.
A couple of my guys, man, I'm just like, I want you to train more.
Guys, I was just going to add a different perspective in regards to I have a couple athletes that do say that like, I really want to like, is there a way to kind of like involve my partner in my training, or like I want to do like a backpacking thing with my partner or whatever. And as a coach, I actually think that that piece is like really important. And so the other thing I would say is like, make sure you're talking to your coach about your partner and your relationship. And if you want to do something like cool with your partner, or you know, I have an athlete that we kind of have their schedule set up where they have a day where they're like doing something else outdoors with their partner, you know. And so I think having that conversation with your coach too, as well as your partner, is something that should be considered. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's an important piece too. Like the partner could potentially like be involved in the whole coaching process and plan.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent point. The more secure that your partner feels and the more like part of your life, like ultimately what it comes down to is what people are typically looking for is feeling secure in the relationship and feeling like they get to be a part of the things that matter to you. And the more that we can provide that to other people, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah. And I would also say it's good for partners to spend time doing things that are very unique and individual to them.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
part of a healthy
we're both like
relationship.
we're very dedicated runners, and we do a couple runs a month together.
Yeah, a lot less than we used to, that's for sure.
We try to prioritize the non-running time together more, and then the running time becomes like a really nice personal time. Like, again, like it wouldn't matter. Like you could be off biking or skiing or fish, like whatever it was, like that time apart is so, I don't know, maybe you'll get into fishing someday. A vegan fishing.
Got so much time for other hobbies.
You've got so much time.
Vegan fisherman.
Vegan fishing. It's just, you just don't touch me. You're just like out there with a
just
fly,
casting.
just casting. Vegan fishing
on the end.
Vegan fly fishing. It's great.
It's hilarious.
It's awesome. You know, like it's okay to want time for yourself. It doesn't make it a bad relationship. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you selfish. That makes you a human. And like having really special, sacred time for yourself is very healthy. And again, partners, I think, will tend to encroach on that time when they are feeling insecure about their level of acceptance in your life or insecure about something else going on with them. And so, you know, ask questions, be open, but also
be curious of the insecurity.
Yeah, be curious and like, don't be afraid to own your shit.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're owning, like if you're a boss in your training and like, yeah, it's taking up time, own it. Like, don't be ashamed that you do something awesome on your own. Like that's great.
And I think also, you know, never hesitate to, you know, really speak up. If that's the way that you want to spend your personal and your free time.
You don't owe anyone an explanation.
You really don't. You just need to be able to communicate that in an effective way.
Yeah. I mean, even if you wanted to just like spend your alone time, like playing video games, staring at the ceiling, like fine.
Yeah,
you know,
I support that.
Yeah, we support that. Just take time for yourself. Running can be that time or it cannot be that time.
Well, cool. I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. I hope everybody has a good weekend and get out there and get some good adventures in. Bye.